Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I'm the Athletic Geek, and joining us for part three is Edmund Livewire McGuire. Mr. Electricity is the first guest I've had on three times, and we're going to address the TV era of AAPW. That's the part we haven't gotten to yet, but first of all, thanks for coming back on.
Hey, glad to be here. What up, everybody?
So, like I just mentioned, there's no need to really buffer it. What was it like whenever you find that show ended? You're the champion, and correct me if I'm wrong. AAPW was kind of in limbo at that time, correct?
hmm Correct. Where did we leave off? I've slept since then, plus chair shots over the years.
Well, we'll just say left off at the last show. You defeat Shane Rich, uh, became the champion or retained the title, or I believe it was retained.
uh,
Retained, wasn't it?
was it where I beat him in West Frankfurt, or?
No, this was the final show before the show. The Just Die, Edmund, Just Die. That one.
Okay, yeah, that was right before TV. Okay, got you.
So after that show, though, were you, for all intents and purposes, that seemed like AAPW's final show. What were your rumblings at that time? What were you hearing as a talent about the future of the company?
I have to go back a little bit. Around this time was when Greg Anthony was brought in as the booker. I want to say he might have been booking like two or three other companies at the time. He had his plate pretty full with that, but Sean had brought him in because I don't know, it just seemed like there was change in the air in general. He was just brought in, and I didn't really know what was going on because this was 2011, early part of 2011. So we were coming off of a year in 2010 where we hadn't ran a lot of shows. I mean, we started out strong in the early part of 2010, but I'd say about the last half we started tapering off a little bit. Um, and it was sort of uncertain as to whether AEPW was going to continue. It just seems like we weren't drawing as many fans. There was a lot going on in the area. Just general interest started seeming to wane a little bit. But as far as that went, it just seems like you really didn't know what to believe because we were just starting back up running shows. We had a new booker, and then it just seems like, I don't know. It's kind of hard. A lot of that's kind of foggy. All I know is that we had a new booker. Things seem to be going in sort of a different direction, but he seemed to kind of want to stay on that course with me and Shane Rich and see that out. But I didn't know whether, with all that was going on, I didn't know if that was sort of like the bookend of AEPW because I kind of heard that, okay, we're going to go ahead and finally give Edmund the championship and let that be, this is per Sean, let that be the bookend that the company needs, and then we'll go ahead and go on. But then you hear something about Chris Hagstrom coming in, and there's a little bit of rumblings there. You just don't know what to believe. It was a couple of irons in the fire, so to speak.
When did you hear that about Chris Hagstrom coming into AAPW and pretty much using his connections and his the production that skill that he has to get AAPW on WSIL TV in the Southern Illinois area?
Well, see, off and on, like I'd say around 2010, like again, whenever we weren't around 2009 or 2010, whenever the show started to taper, two of those big shows we did were at Rent One Park, and we'd been through that before, where he was tied in with the miners and did their production and so on and so forth. But as far as him coming in, it was sometime close to the show where Shane and I was going to have our big blow off match. I'd heard something about his name was just coming up. I didn't know too much about it. As far as I knew going into that, I believe it was like March 12th, 2011. Going into that March 12th show at West Frankfort, um, Chris was, you know, you didn't know much.
Right.
Again, a lot of that's foggy. You didn't know much, but all I knew was that there was some things going on, and with that, Greg booking and not knowing for sure whether this was going to be the last show, you just didn't. So I'm sorry if I can't give you
Oh no, you're
much
fine.
detail there, but it's a lot of it's cloudy because there was a lot of uncertainty.
Right. Um, what were your initial thought? I guess opinions of Chris Hackstrom when he was brought in to the organization, or just as a man whenever you first met Chris? What did you think of him and I guess his vision? You would say.
Well, I'd known Chris since about 2004, whenever
Okay.
he, this was around the time, they still had the training school down in Sykeston with Dangerous Donnie, and
Right.
Homicidal was, traveling from Marion and picking me up in Cairo and to Sykeston and training and so on. And one time he had brought Chris along, and he might have been a student at SIU at the time, but he was actually training to wrestle. And then it seemed like he dropped off the radar there for a while, and then I'd seen him again in later years at the Rent One shows, and I'd always gathered him as just a real good dude. Like he always seemed loving and loud, boisterous, and just a real true wrestling fan. Like he was always enthusiastic, and if you're enthusiastic about wrestling, I want to be around you.
Right.
So I no good vibes when it comes to him.
Um,
But as far as him coming in, um, again, like I said, I didn't know too much as we were leading up to what I thought was the last show. But when his name came up, I'm thinking like, okay, I knew enough to know he was working at SIU and he was in the production or over the production or something like that, and that it could have led to bigger things. But I didn't get my hopes up too much because, as far as I knew, once again, this was the last show. But you know,
right.
we would see how that would turn out in the months to come.
Do you remember when you found out that it was a for sure? Do you remember your feelings that you had when you found out, hey, be it SIU and the TV studio, we're taping a pilot episode. We're we're gonna try and make a go of this.
I
AAPW
knew
on TV.
nothing about it until after the March 12th, 2011 show. Um, I thought me and Rich had the big off match. We'd ended our rivalry and closed the book on AAPW. That was my assumption. Um, I didn't really have plans to do anything else, wrestling related. But excuse me, sorry.
You're good.
Um, but it was shortly after that show that I started hearing rumblings about, oh, there's going to be a studio TV taping at the communications building in Carbondale. Chris Hackstrom was over it, and it's part of his student's final project. And I'm just like, hang on, what now? I honestly cannot remember who told me all this. It might have actually been Sean, but I'm not. As a matter of fact, I'm quite sure it was Sean because I didn't talk um, house business with a lot of other people besides him. Um, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Like I said, chair shots. Um, um, I remember hearing about that, and I'm just like, So AAPW isn't going under, and apparently there's a lot of stuff that I'm not aware of that took place. But it lent itself to the upward trajectory of AAPW at the time because I'm like thinking, okay, I won, finally got the big, win, finally conquered Shane Rich, one championship that had been so elusive. Okay, if there was going to be any bookend to a company,
Right.
there you go, and then let's move on. I was fine with that, and again, like I said, I had thought to that point that's what it was, but then I'm hearing all this other stuff, and Hagstrom coming in, and then I believe that show at the taping at the SIU Communications Center fell on WrestleMania weekend that year,
Yes.
WrestleMania 27 weekend. So it was quite a fun occasion. Like WrestleMania weekends, big enough. I
Right.
mean, me and my son, that's kind of our thing every year, and that's just good memories. But to add that onto it, it was just like, oh, okay, well, let's see what comes of this. I didn't get my hopes up too much, but let's just see what comes of it. Just one thing at a time.
Right.
But that's just kind of where I was with it at the time.
Was did you feel you had to wrestle differently, knowing that you had more than just the the crowd in the building that day uh, to work to? You knowing that you also had a camera, knowing that you also had different camera angles. Did you have to work any differently? Did they brief you on anything like, hey, you're going to have to change a few things up because of you know camera angles and whatnot? Basically,
Because it was a production, basically.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Do you have to change up your style and all, or and do you know of anybody else that maybe had to?
um, well, for one, to expand up on everything I just told you, this was our first show, into the TV era. So it was almost kind of like a whole reset.
Right.
I was just glad that AAPW hadn't went under yet. So I was, just kind of going into this whole thing. I'm like not really knowing what to expect, but Greg Anthony again, he booking, and I talked to him a couple of times a week to that point, and he would tell me, little things, and about his television experience, and things to look for, and um, things that maybe that would benefit me, as we embark upon it. And, as I arrived that day, I remember it was kind of hectic,
Right. Um.
because a lot of us hadn't had experience.
Right.
I don't recall that any of our original crew had really done anything TV related. I mean, if we did, it was just some, obscure booking somewhere, and they just happened to be filming it for a local access TV,
Right.
whatever. And we just happened to be on TV, but it's something we would never see, because it was probably so far off the radar. But this was different. It actually felt like a production, with collective efforts, and Hagstrom was just ever the professional. There really, to answer your question, there really wasn't much of a difference. We weren't asked to change up anything that would cramp our style.
Right.
So, I mean, it was kind of, expressly, you know, noted that we, play to the camera. We know that we're not just, focusing on the crowd that's in the house. We're playing to an audience, an even bigger audience that's, watching on television.
Right.
or what we hoped was an even bigger audience. Even at that time, there was nothing promised. But
Right.
I mean, it was just kind of common sense. Everybody, played their role, they did their part, and you know, just yeah.
um, in the build up, the kind of the big in game to
Hmm.
the first season of TV was AAPW main event, and anybody who's listened to this show has known how much I still hold that event in high regard.
Right.
Um, you on that show you wrestled Axe Allward,
Yes, sir.
and just do you have any memories of the build up to that match with Axe Allward?
Um, well, Accident storyline wise, it had a long history. Like as long as I've been wrestling, um, Axe had been a thorn in my side. But he's probably the person I've worked with the most. Um, just in any circumstance, in the ring, traveling, just learning from him and that sort of thing. But as far as the build up, um, it was different in the sense that we actually had a directive, in a direction as far as where we were going with something. Whereas before that, when there was no TV and we were just making towns and knocking off shots, we were doing what felt good and what contributed to what we felt constituted a great match.
Right.
Our styles and philosophies and stuff like that were very similar, and we always vibed real well. So I felt like that's why we worked together so great. But in this instance, where there's TV cameras involved, nuanced storytelling was key. We just took everything that we done, I guess, up to that point, and just we had to condense some of it, but we just did we just basically did what we would normally do in any other situation, but just do it in accordance with telling the story on camera.
Right.
Again, like I said, we actually had a direction as far as some Greg says, okay, here's what we're doing, here's what we're building to, and he didn't put words in our mouth or anything. He just basically said, gave us bullet
Okay. Um,
points, and we hit those bullet the best of our ability.
with the exception of maybe Shane Rich, do you think there would have been a better person as far as just history in AAPW with? You think there could have been anybody better to have been your opponent on that evening?
Um, I honestly don't think that there should have been
Right.
anybody in that spot besides Axe. For one, he'd always been a backbone for the company, and always reliable, always showed up on time. Other than the time he injured his Achilles tendon, he never missed a shot. Um, but I mean, as far as just the whole story, just our career, like I will always call Axe Allward my career rival and probably my greatest opponent. Um, but as far as how everything built up and just you know January 14th, 2012, AEPW main event, the biggest show in company history. Two long time rivals settle the score like to me that was fight night. It shouldn't have been anything else. So no, nobody else besides Axe.
What was what sort of feelings did you have that day of that show? You mentioned, you just said fight night. Um, you know, it was a very, I keep mentioning how special of a night that was.
Hmm.
What was your perspective, you know, heading to the building that day, getting set up for, a very, very different sort of show, a much larger crowd, a lot of people who traveled for kind of the bigger names, the El Generico, Pac, who were booked on the card. What was your feeling like as a performer that, well, this is bigger than, this is bigger than New Beginnings, this is bigger than Sports Blast, this is bigger than Hair in High School. What were your
Oh, it
feelings like?
definitely felt bigger. The of it is, I never took one show or event, however you want to describe it. Um, I never took any show that we did for granted, whether it was the VFW in Sparta or New Beginnings, because the whole idea of AEPW, no matter your perspective, we were all working to get to that point. That was the whole end game. So, I mean, it wasn't just storyline, it wasn't just cliche, it was just, you know, every single show that we did, no matter the size of the crowd, no matter the size of the town, no matter the quality of venue, everything led up to that point. And I, it was almost like an outer body experience. I remember, riding to the show with my buddy Dennis, and he could probably tell you, what my demeanor was like. I don't recall saying much that day because I mean I wasn't like jittery nervous, but I knew the occasion. I knew what was up. I wasn't sleep to it. I mean I'm just like, man, like you said, it felt bigger than a sports blast or anything else to that point. You know, we had some globally renowned talent coming in. This show actually had some buzz. I knew that I had heard about advanced ticket sales and, this, that, and the other. And, just the fact that, with, WSIL and, God bless Kevin Huntsberger for being the piece of the puzzle to make that whole deal come together. Um, just seeing how everyone come together and how it built, and then the fan base that we built, and you to the point where you're walking through Walmart, and at 3, 4, 5 times you get people actually knowing who you are. Hey, aren't you the guy that wrestles on TV on Saturday mornings? It's just like, wow. It actually got to that point, but bringing it back around to your question, it was just like that was kind of my perspective of it all, knowing that you know everything that had built to that was actually paying off on that given night. I mean, putting up the flyers and any kind of elements, doing it for basically nothing. I didn't get paid to do any of that stuff. I volunteered, it was part of the due paying process. I feel
Right.
like, that's just something that you do. I don't care what level you're as business, you never done paying your dues. I never complained about that. I felt like all that was paying off in that one night. So that was kind of my perspective of it all.
Um, Before we get into your match, we mentioned the world renowned talent that were coming in. Do you have any memories of your interaction with uh, Pac and El Generico on that evening?
Of course, I was familiar with them, Generico and Colt Cabana more so than Pac and M Dog 2020, who came in as a surprise.
Mhm.
I had no clue that M Dog was even going to be there, but I was somewhat familiar with him. I maybe seen a couple of matches of his. Um, they all were like really nice. I mean,
Okay.
just real humble acting. Didn't you could look at them and tell that they were just kind of on another plane.
Right.
The way they carried themselves, how business like. I mean, they were friendly, but they were also very business. Again, like I said, they didn't act above anyone. Um, I can remember Pac, or who people now know as Neville. I mean, or depending on your fandom, AEW Pac,
That's a
WWE
yeah.
Neville.
He's back to Pac now. So.
Well, there you go. But there's still some
Oh
people
yeah,
out
there's still
there.
the Neville people.
There you go. I remember him being in the ring and um, doing his flips and stretching, and it was almost like a doggone yoga routine. And I'm just like, damn, this dude is like legit. Like I remember him and Farmer Billy Hills in the ring, just kind of, sitting Indian, and they're just like, talking, just, it seemed like Farmer was just picking his brain, and dude was just, you know, they were just going back and forth. And this is me watching far now, and I'm like, oh wow, it was good to see that because now I mean, no matter how how much of a globetrotter you are, you're not any bigger than the next person. That
It's
was
funny you mentioned that. The
mhm,
episode hasn't dropped yet, but Jay Spade has a pretty funny story about or it hasn't dropped. The episode hasn't dropped the time this recording. By the time this comes up, it will have
right.
dropped. Jay Spade has a funny story about Pac like putting like his flip flop shoes on like his hands when he's doing like handstand dips, and Jay, you have to listen to it. I'm kind of paraphrasing, like when it's like, "Oh, is that some kind of technique?" And he's like, "No, I just don't want to get my hands dirty." And like, okay,
Now, see, again, it was sort of a busy day and it was hectic, and I missed that one, but I do recall Pac, Generico, and Cabana, or it might have been M Dog. Like there was a shuffleboard in the back, and they were back there just playing. I can't remember if it was shuffleboard or ping pong, or it was some kind of a table. I think it was ping pong. It might have, but they were just back there, just shooting the shit, and it was very loose atmosphere. I mean, amongst those guys, for us it was WrestleMania, but
right.
it was nice to see that. But they were just real, common dudes. They didn't come in acting above anyone. If you speak to them, they spoke back. They talked to you. Looked you in the eye. I mean, it was just a real cool to meet them. Good experience.
So we get to your match. You have maybe the unenviable task of having to follow Pac and El Generico.
Oh God.
I think you, with the storytelling and to the AAPW fan base, I feel like you held your own compared to them, but what was the feeling like, after you and Axe maybe see that match and you realize, hey, we're gonna have to work our asses off to really kind of follow that. Did that increase any anxiety, or was it still kind of just business as usual? You know what you and Axe can do. You know that you and Axe can, put on good matches, put on great matches. Did
It
that?
it was. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Also, did that change kind of the perspective of the match? Of, hey, we might need to increase the violence a little bit, or hey, we may need to increase the high spots a little bit, or hey,
No, sir.
we may need to do something a little different. Did it change anything?
Not at all. I was confident in the story that we were going out there to tell. Um, I didn't have any anxiety. Of course, there's those pre-match nerves. You hear it all the time to the point of cliche, but if you're not nervous or don't have sweaty palms before you walk out, then get out of business, or that's the time to get out. Um, for me, I work best under pressure, be it wrestling or quote unquote real life, under pressure, that's when I shine, I feel like. So that wasn't so much a a big deal for me. Again, X is a good, partner to have out there in the ring and work with. I was confident that the story had built, and as far as our positioning on the card, I honestly felt like I don't know why I thought for some reason Colt Cabana's match was going to be booked last. I mean, I just thought he was kind of the, you know, who else was on that card? Uh, was Pac Generico, M
Colt
Dog.
wrestled Greg Anthony.
No, 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 no. Heath wrestled Greg in the opener. He wrestled another Tennessee guy, Eric Wayne,
Eric Wayne, that's right, that's right. Yeah.
3G.
Eric Wayne, and then Poker Face wrestled M Dog.
Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, Colt out of all of them, or him and Generico, I thought Colt maybe was the biggest name on the card.
Right,
So that would probably constitute him being in the main event slot, despite the fact that we were the title match. Being a wrestling fan, to me, there should be nothing more important on the card than the championship match. So, in that token, we were where we needed to be.
right,
But going into that night, I'm thinking, oh, we're not going up last. I don't care how much we're built. Of course, I coming in and, help draw the, you know, tickets and all that sort of thing. He's going to get the top slot. I
right,
was kind of expecting it. Not that I cared. I just wanted to just go out there and, do my part, tear the house down, represent the company, you do that sort of thing. But there was a moment where the card finally got posted in the back, and then I see, Heath, Greg, Madman, KC, all those guys. I'm working. I'm just thinking, okay, I expect this after intermission, maybe after Kevin Huntsberger and Mike Masters, maybe not before, but after, but not after Colt Cabana's match.
um,
you know, but then I'm inching my way down the cart and you see Pac and El Generico. I'm like, oh shit, Colt Cabana and 3G and uh, Kevin Huntsberger, Mike Masters, semi-main, and then Axe and Livewire on last. I'm like, how the hell am I gonna follow all this shit?
did
but
you feel rewarded though that they still thought enough of their core guys to give? You are. I agree 100%. The belt should always be the last match and the most important thing. But did you feel
right,
like that was validation for all your hard work? Of hey, I'm getting top billing over international superstars and a Ring of Honor superstar and a local celebrity that had a huge hand in drawing this house. Did you feel validated with that?
I did. Um, it it felt really good, and once again, knowing what all we had been through, knowing that we had been on the cusp of falling off the cliff on more than one occasion, knowing that there were times where we didn't know if we were going to have an exit, to know everything that you know, I know that everybody, Sean especially, being the owner and such. But no, everybody did their part. But I don't know how much they put in compared to what I put. I only know what um, I know the hard work and the bumps and the, you know, coming up with these storylines and putting up these flyers and just doing all I could to get the the company name out and the brand, to know that all that is rewarded in that one moment. Yeah, I'm just like, how am I gonna follow Pac and El Generico? But on the other hand, it's just like hell fucking yes. Like, but I don't know that if anybody else besides Greg Anthony were in the Booker's chair, I don't know that that would have happened.
Well, okay.
That's just me speaking
Well,
candidly.
let's taper off of that. I mean, you first of all, what'd you think of your match? And then the next thing I was going to ask you after that is we heard from a lot of the previous guests, Sean, Bull Bronson, that unfortunately at the biggest, what was the biggest night, there was some drama backstage regarding Greg Anthony, who was booking at the time.
Hmm.
How'd you think of the match with Axe and how it turned out? And then subsequently, what was your perspective as a talent on what was going on with the booker behind the scenes?
Okay. I'm sorry, I yawned.
You're good.
Um, as far as the match, I feel like it went off without a hitch. I mean, I won't say it was Axe and I's best match. It didn't really need to be the best quote unquote technical match. I mean,
Right.
it was a heated rivalry. Um, so of course there was going to be more of a brawling element to it. It was more story. I mean, we were
Right.
pretty much, the icing on the cake, of the entire show. We were just putting the final touches on everything. But I was happy with the match. I mean, the if you look back on the DVD or go um, back and watch Collision on YouTube, and you look at the episode where they featured that match, there was no one seated. So that right there is, that's a compliment. If no one's sitting down and they're fixated on the ring and everything that you're doing, and you got the crowd right in the palm of your hand, myself and Axe, that's a huge ass compliment, dude. So I
Um,
mean, I walked away from that match very, very pleased. But you know, there's what happened on the other side of the curtain, and then I'll let you take it from there.
well, I've heard what Sean had to say. I've heard what Bull had to say. I've heard what Heath had to say. I'm ready to hear what you
Uh-huh.
had to say. You get
Yeah, cause I was right there.
well, like just you get back from the back. Here's this huzzah moment. You've main evented the biggest show. Not a not a fan sitting down. You
Hmm.
definitely
It was a high.
yeah. You come from that high, and then you go backstage, and what we don't see is apparently a bunch of drama. Mike Masters is hurt. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
um, um. So for the
he
high
got
and the
busted pretty bad, dude.
yeah, the home run and the like almost like winning the World Series that had to
Hmm.
feel like for AAPW. It's like going back to the locker room and there's no champagne and there's no trophy almost. Is that kind of what it was like, or just take me through what you were feeling when you got back? Were you privy to any of this?
I have to go back a few weeks
Okay,
before we, you know, I want to be as candid and as honest as possible
right
when
on.
it comes to this stuff. Um, I recall the whole first season leading up to AEPW main event. I remember some of the guys being sort of not so, I don't know what the word would be, but a lot of them were sort of disgruntled with Greg Anthony's booking. Um, I can't really speak for them, but I can see where they were coming from because if you go back and look at some of the episodes from season one, you start to notice sort of a shift. You start to see more, Memphis and Tennessee and Arkansas based guys rather than a lot of your regular stalwarts of AAPW like Playboy Paul. Uh, Mike was pretty featured with Kevin, but I do Mike, sort of, having his issues. Um, Not to name drop, but again, like I
Right.
said, I have no reason not to be honest here. Um, I just recall there being some unhappy campers in the back. Um, I can't really say I was booked badly. I would be wrong to say that because I, I'm just gonna be honest with you. Greg Anthony gave me a chance that I don't feel like I would have gotten otherwise. Sean at the helm.
Okay.
Um, that's a whole nother story in and of itself.
Hmm.
But I don't think me even becoming champion would have been talked about or a possibility without Greg. He saw something in me. He put me at the helm, and I feel like with all my hard work, I deserve to be there.
Right.
Um, but that's a whole nother story. Um, like I said, there were people who were disgruntled and unhappy about a lot of Greg's booking decisions. I remember Sean calling me up one afternoon or evening. Um, I remember it vividly because I happened to have an off day from work that day, and he happened to catch me, and he was asking me, so he was just like, "What do you think about becoming Booker?" He said, "There's a lot of guys who are unhappy with Greg and this and that and so on and so forth." And you at that time I really had no interest being the booker. Did I want to become booker before? Yes, absolutely. As Sean said in his episode, I'd expressed maybe 2 or 3 years prior when we were hardly drawing. I'm like, I'm just like, look, dude, I know I don't have the experience, but I feel like I have you know, a creative side that could probably get us where we need to be. But at that time, Sean kind of ixnayed that. So I was kind of under the assumption I'll never get the book, and whatever. So fast forward 2, 3 years later, here's this thing, and people are unhappy with Greg. Now all of a sudden, he's looking at me and asking me to come in and save the day because there's guys that are unhappy with Greg, you know. And I'm just like, you know, I wasn't sure whether to say yeah, because if I did, that would put some heat on me
Right.
with Greg. I'm just like, what is Sean trying to achieve here? Because let's be honest, I think Sean had took a job elsewhere,
He did
and
say that he took a job elsewhere in his interview. Yes.
right, so he wasn't really um, on the day to day operation of the company. Not that we were running on a day to day basis, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
more or less, Chris Hackstrom had took that over. He was pretty much chief of operations at that time. But for Sean to come to me and say, "Hey, if you want the book, it's yours." I would rather have someone who knows the product, this, that, and the other, um, and that the guys can trust in, and I would come to find out later that if you're the booker, especially at that time, the way the chips fell, I just so happened to be the champion as well. You know, I already got instant heat. So he really kind of put me in a bad spot. But at the time, I'm thinking like, okay, it's either now or never. I may not ever get this offer, you know. So I'm just like, I can't remember what my response to it was, but it was pretty much to the effect of, you're going to do what you want to do anyway, Sean. I didn't say no, but I more or less wanted to see how the chips was going to fall first.
Right.
So back to AEPW main event, I remember after coming back from the ring and and the match and coming to the back, I'm cooling down, and Sean's just like, Ed, you're gonna need to have to hurry up and get dressed out. We're gonna have to have this meeting. It was just like high anxiety. It felt slimy, dude. It felt like something underhanded was about to go down. And on the flip side of this, Greg had booked this thing and helped put 500 people out here in this arena, and he was riding on a high too. He was happy and he had every right to be.
Right.
But there was that part in the back of my mind. I'm thinking like, I kind of knew what was going to go down, and I felt like shit knowing that Sean was about to drop the hammer on this dude. So that part of me felt like shit.
Right.
Especially, and me and Greg always got along decently anyway. I would like that we still would if we, worked together and, I haven't talked to him in a few years. I remember going down to one of his shows in Dyersburg just on a whim one night just to hang out with the guys, renting the bull down there and everything. But it didn't seem to be any hard feelings by that time. A couple of years had passed. The whole shit seemed to be water under the bridge. But on this given night, after, again, like I said, after the matches are over, got toweled off. We didn't have no showers. Got dressed, you know, and I got Sean. I'm just like, hey man, I'm ready when you're ready. And he grabbed Greg. We went in this back room, and myself, Sean, Greg, um, Huntsberger, and Hagstrom. And Sean was pretty much the mouthpiece. And I'm not sure I knew how much Hagstrom and Huntsberger knew, but they had to know something was going on, otherwise they wouldn't have been in the room.
Right.
Um, but Greg was the only one that wasn't privy. So, he booked the show, helped us draw these people here. I'm thinking, yeah, he probably thinking, we're just going to have a review of the show. I don't know what he was thinking, but if I were in his shoes, I'd be thinking, hey, let's talk about where we're going to go moving forward. No, Sean pretty much just dropped the hammer on him, and I can't remember word for word, but he pretty much told him that there were some people that were unhappy with, his booking, and that, you know, I had had interest in being a booker for the longest time, and that he was going to hand the book over to me, and that I was going to book season 2 moving forward. Now, I don't recall having that conversation with Sean. Once again, it was kind of open ended. In
Right.
regards to our conversation we had weeks prior. Um, and I didn't really have any genuine interest, but he had asked me, how would you book this person, that sort of thing. And I guess it sounded good enough for him to have confidence in me to, go ahead and book season 2. So I didn't really have a hand in it. It was just kind of like, okay, I'm finding out I'm booking season 2. Greg's finding out his services are no longer needed. So you could visibly see, the blood drain out of his face, and he was just washed over with shock and just like, well, what the hell? I just got you guys a sellout crowd, and you could just see Hagstrom and Huntsberg over there. They were just uncomfortable with the whole situation. Again, it felt slimy, and I don't, I see where Sean's coming from. He's wanting to be loyal to his guy. I get that, but I don't know. Something just did like. I'm speaking on my own behalf here.
Right.
Something just didn't feel right about it. But what were we going to do? It was, we had to move forward. So I remember that next day, or I think me and Greg talked on the phone. Maybe we texted, and he had asked me how long had I known about it, and I'm just like, well, I kind of had an idea weeks prior that some kind of shift was going to happen. I had no clue that I was actually going to be taking over as Booker. That was kind of heaped up on me, even though I had expressed interest before. There wasn't any interest in the recent for me to care enough to want to take on that task, but here I am now. And, that was kind of that. And I'm just, that was kind of one of those moments where, whether he meant to or not, I felt like Sean was kind of a buzzkill on that night. And, that was sort of that. And what could you do but move forward? So
Do
onward and upward to season two.
do you think that instead of him getting ousted, him being a golden boy, instead of him getting
Yes, sir.
ousted as Booker in that meeting, if
Hmm.
Sean would have just went, look, we appreciate what you did for us, but I need my
Hmm.
guys.
Right.
Not saying don't bring in yours, but I'm saying we need more of a role for my guys. Do you think Greg would have been receptive to that, or do you think that that would have just been a powder keg that would have prolonged the inevitable even more?
I think it would have been more of the latter. Um, I've worked with Greg, and he and I have always vibed well. I've only dealt with him from a booking standpoint, just that whole entire season one. And it may have seemed like it was a lot, but it really wasn't. I didn't have too many dealings with him, other than bullet points and then going about our business. He seemed to be, sort of stretched thin and dealing with other people as well. But I think Greg had, I think Greg had, I think he would have been too proud to stick around anyway. Just to be pretty frank about that, I don't think he would have been long for the company. So
Okay.
yeah.
So moving on from that, you get the book. What were kind
Mm-hmm.
of some of the ideas that you had for the roster out of the gate? Just real quick, I know there's a few more big things we got to talk about, but you've been given the book. You're kind of being entrusted to use the regulars, use the people that brought them to the dance. Did you remember like any changes that you knew you had to make? Any ideas you
Um,
had for certain talents other than yourself? Take me through that.
well, I knew first and foremost, me being champion and being the booker, that had to be the main change. So I started to doctor up a sort of an exit strategy there, just so that there wouldn't be a conflict of interest. I would not want to be one of those bookers that developed a reputation for booking himself on time. So that was my first order of business right there. I wanted to implement more. I really wanted to sort of give AEPW a fresh coat of paint because, like, it was just like in the years leading to it, like I don't know that it was contemporary enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you were on the other side of the guardrail. I believe that you would know what I mean when I say that.
Yeah. Um,
Um, I wanted the talent roster to be more diverse, not just a bunch of oiled up, muscle, wet haired guys from Nashville that looked alike, so cookie cutter. Um, I didn't want there to be a bunch of guys that looked like they should have been on the other side of the guardrail buying a ticket. I wanted there to be a pretty decent mix. You had your Madmans, you had your Blue Bronsons, you had your Truck Thompsons, you had, your Axes. I just wanted there to be more, diversity as far as that went. I remember Adam Testa. Um, I honestly don't know what his supposed title was around AAPW. He was in with Hagstrom. He was in with Huntsberger. And he was more, he had his finger on the pulse as far as, indie talent. He watched the whole Dragons Gate promotion and, he was up on that sort of thing and he was big into tournaments and point systems. And, I always wanted AAPW to have a cruiserweight division because let's face it, we had a lot of small roster.
right.
So I remember myself. This was after a media blitz. We had did like a whole radio and TV run one morning, and Testa came to me with this whole idea for the No Limits division, and he had explained it to me. And I'm like, well, that sounds right up my alley because I wanted to implement a cruiserweight division.
Right.
But No Limits sounded like a good enough marketing, deal to where okay, they can be the cruiserweight division. Let's just call it the No Limits division, sort of like TNA's X division.
Right.
But his idea was to introduce it in a tournament form with like point-based systems and all this sort of stuff to where it just sounded so convoluted and it's not that I was trying to short his idea. I'm just more or less on the side of let's keep this a bit more simple and let's just hold a basic tournament
Um,
to crown our first champion, and that way it appeases him, and then we can go on from there. But that was one of the things, and again, like I said, just to give AEPW a fresh coat of paint,
um,
bring it more up into at the time 2011 and 2012.
right.
Yeah.
So you yourself, you're mentioning you wanted to get the belt off of yourself, so you enter into
Mm-hmm.
a feud with another one of your great rivals, Mike Masters.
Oh, what
And
fun we had.
oh yeah, well, I'm getting ready to ask. This is to where, from my perspective, I was starting to kind of see like, oh, AAPW is really they're really doing some new stuff that I didn't
Hmm.
expect to see from AAPW, where you did a storyline where Mike was stalking you, stalking your family, videotaping you out in public.
Hmm.
I had Mike on the show to talk about what it was like for him shooting those sort of vignettes. What was it like for you? And do you have any stories from shooting those vignettes
Well,
that were really kind of groundbreaking for something in this area?
and why not? I mean, we had the TV time. Why not make the most of it? You know what I mean? Like we had all had a contributing hand in getting us there. Why not? Like, as I said Greg Anthony in first season, he had his way of booking. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just, our guys were sort of, phased out to the side. But I wanted to do something entirely, totally different from season one or anything that we had done in AEPW before. So, I remember that wasn't just solely my idea. I can't remember. I remember myself and Testa talking about it and then running it by Chris Hagstrom, and he okayed it. But that was kind of like we all put our together on that one. It just all kind of came together like, okay, what if we did this? Okay, what if we did that? Oh, let's expand that. What if we did this? Oh man, that would be badass, you know. I didn't even smart the kid. I'm sorry. I didn't even smarten the kid up to what was going on. Like
Really.
that was the greatest part of it all. And I'm sorry. I mean, he's gotten a little bit taller than me. He's probably big enough to kick my ass now. For now that he knows this. But no, he was just a little guy. I can't remember how old he was at the time, but it was just as simple as, you know, um, you know, be ready, Dad's coming through. We're going to get ice cream. I remember like it was the plan was to go and hang out with him that day, but
Right.
to kill two birds with one stone. And I remember him, the little guy, just asking me, "Why is Chris Hagstrom here?" And we went to the park, and we just it was just normal, but
You're working your son though.
me and him would just walk. Yeah, pretty much working them, and while we're all playing and hanging out, Hagstrom's got the camera and or Mike Masters,
Quote unquote
is
Mike
from
Masters.
afar lurking in the weeds and recording us,
Right.
that sort of thing. Same for when we went to Dairy Queen, and got some ice cream, he's lurking, he's getting to me. Um, as far as our idea to go with Masters, um, for one, I love Mike. He was just a good dude. Like,
Right.
you know,
He definitely, from a fan's perspective, even though we were
I
disappointed to
might have
see you
told you.
lose, we were definitely happy for
Uh-huh.
Mike because we knew how much Mike worked hard for this promotion.
Well, see, here's the thing, and this is me, and I hope Mike listens to this and doesn't feel a certain type of way after the fact. But I didn't exactly know who Mike Masters was, or what Mike Masters was, or what motivated him. He didn't really have much of an identity. You know what I mean? But he was a good enough heel, and he was slimy enough, and did a lot of cheating in his matches and all that sort of stuff. I'm just like, okay, how can I expand upon this? Like the whole thing, it was like some of the things I want to implement. I want to implement story because we have a medium now.
Right.
Let's flex some of these storytelling chops. And here's the thing about that, and I'll get back on Mike here in a second, but I'm sorry, some of the guys like up on explaining this to them, like they didn't get it. Like I'm like they were just treating the whole thing like, oh, this is just another shot. You know, you know, they're so used to just going here and there and just working shots. Like, okay, yeah, this might be another booking, but we're here we tell stories. Here we do things a little different. We're just not doing something for the context of one match. Like
Right.
we actually have, a means to an end here. So back to Mike, it was just like, I just felt like there was something more and something that could be tapped into. So, and I'm looking at all the other heels on our roster too, like Axe, but had been, we just got done with that,
Right.
and we had other heels on the roster. Bull was being built with an undefeated streak, but I don't think he was quite ready yet. Shane Rich was out with injury, but he was on his way back, but I don't think he had been cleared by this time, so I couldn't go with him. So pretty much I was forced to go with Mike, but it worked out because, like I said, there's something there. So it was just, again, season premiere. He wins the battle royal. The story I wanted to tell with that was, okay, Mike Masters, surprise, he wins the battle royal. He gets a title shot the next week. You know, foot under the rope, on the rope, whatever it was. I pinned him. Okay, he has an alibi there or an out, but he feels screwed. The whole Huntsberger thing, getting hit with the chair, that snapped something inside him. This is what I'm wanting. This is the story I'm wanting to tell. There's some meat on the bone, so to speak. So this is when people started really getting into it because it's just like, and I think the people kind of felt it too, like, cause we're starting to see a AEPW take a darker turn with the storylines,
Right. Um,
and felt like Mike was the guy for that role, and I felt like the stars aligned perfectly.
yeah. So you dropped the title to Masters, and it was a good match, great match. Main evented your summer show. The one thing I had to ask you about that match, not taking anything away from Mike's moment or your role in the match, but when I think of that match, the only thing I can think of is Chris Hagstrom being like 10 times more livid than you that you
Oh
lost.
yeah, I recall that. And if you look around on Facebook, like my now deactivated Facebook page, there is a picture that exists that tells that whole entire story. Like I was down in the corner after the match, my eyes are like red and mad, and I'm looking at Hagstrom who's standing on the side of the ring with his arms wide spread, mouth open, catching flies, eyes bucked, and he just like what, like just
Remember, he
what you're
ripped his
saying,
shirt
like him
off.
being so, yeah, like doing the whole flare bit, like it was hard for me to keep a straight face because I'm selling the knee, but I'm also looking at Hacksham out here, you know, carrying on like a plumb fool, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's so extra. But I mean, it makes for a good, funny
Oh
story.
yeah, I compared him to, it's like, you finish watching your team lose the big game, and the players, they're kind of moping off the field. They're disappointed. You might see their heads are down, and then
Right.
there's the fan in the crowd, and he's like throwing his beer, he's throwing his popcorn, he's throwing his hat onto the
Just
field. He's like,
over the
"What
top.
the? This has ruined my life seeing my team lose," and it's like, wow, these guys literally just lost the biggest game of your life, and they're not champions, but they're handling
Right.
it better than you are.
Right.
That
But
was the vibe
as
I
far
got.
as far as yeah, right. As far as that night, Summer Chaos, and again, and I know I keep going back, but it like I kind of want to touch on just things that fell into place as far as how
Sure.
I wanted to book AEPW. I just didn't want shows to be shows. Like I like the idea of an AAPW main event. Like I was always a fan of, now there's a pay-per-view every other week.
Right.
But back then you had 4 or 5 big pay-per-views a year per season. That gives the storylines enough time to build up in between them. And I felt like we had that. So, um, you know, our big event for the summer was Summer Chaos. And, I had the idea for the anniversary show to be our WrestleMania, from the, however many years after we, our inception, that would be our celebration, that would be our anniversary, our WrestleMania style event, or our Starcade, so to speak.
Right.
But I just always, looked at things a little bit bigger. I mean, come on, it's wrestling, man. Everything's supposed to be bigger.
Right.
But, as far as that night, um, things had, gotten so heated. Like, we actually had some online buzz. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm with you.
Okay. We actually had some online buzz, and I believe, incident with Mike Masters and the fan. Um, you know, that actually made the St. Louis Post Dispatch
Right.
because it was a fan incident. It was like a whole write up, and I'm just like, man, if we're making this kind of buzz, then we're doing something right. You know
Right.
what I mean? And like, and just the whole thing, like Mike was supposedly suspended, or not suspended, but fired from AEPW, and this is where I wanted to introduce Sean, even though he, was kicking and screaming against the whole idea, but he did not want to be like an authority figure. He didn't want to be, um, he didn't want any kind of a role like that because he's just like, well, Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff had done this to death over the years. And I'm just like, Sean, we're not Vince McMahon, we're not Eric Bischoff, and nor will we ever be. But you are Chambers, and you are a dick. I mean, not like Sean is a dick. Like, I'm pretty sure he will be the first to tell you that, because there's been times where we butted heads and disagreed on things, and I'm just like, this guy's a freaking dick. He's a lovable dick, but he's a dick.
Yeah.
But I mean, you listen to the guys in the back, they're just like, Sean's, and I wanted to channel that. I wanted our show to have characters, not just wrestlers, characters. Um, that's where I introduced Sean, and he, wanted to bring Mike back, cause he's the promoter. He sees an opportunity, just like a slimy promoter. Let's go ahead and book this match for Summer Chaos. Um, it will put Mike's career on the line. If he loses, we'll never see him in AAPW again. That sort of thing. That way he gets what he wants, and he was already threatening, legal possibilities. It was just a whole thing, again, like I said, just to introduce characters, get the belt off of me, put the belt on the Mike, continue to draw solid crowds, to do that sort of thing. And, we didn't draw as big of a crowd as we did for main event, but we did pretty well. I just felt like, you can always do better. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I do feel like, I feel like sometimes, I don't know if it's just Southern Illinois, or, not really being a hotbed for wrestling or whatever, but I do feel like sometimes the fans kind of took for granted what they had. Like, the ones who were there,
Right.
will always be appreciated. But there were just some people who claimed they didn't know about the show. So I felt like that sort of affected our turnout a little bit, but that didn't stop us from putting on a good show. And I felt like the mission was accomplished as far as getting the title off of me. I'll tell you what, though, that was probably the most heated, not just in temperature, like, cause that building was hot as hell that night, but like, just the heat level, like, there was a vibe in the air. I don't know if you felt it. I remember where you were sitting that night, but I don't know if you felt the air of hostility in the crowd
Oh yeah,
or in
it
the
felt.
building that night. But
I felt it, and and I was kind of like buying into it until, and I'm not trying to pick on Chris, but
hmm
until I saw Chris react that way, and then I'm just like, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
it made you scoff a little.
Yeah, it's like, oh damn
But
it,
but but as far as that storyline, we had built it so to where there
people
were
hated
actually,
Mike.
yeah, there were fans that were scared that Mike was going to attack them.
Right,
But in an odd sense, that was also part of the draw, because Mike had been built to a point of being, not trying to steal from Brian Pillman here, but he was sort of a villain, and that had become in and of itself the draw.
right,
What's this guy going to do? So, I mean, we had him coming out with security surrounding him. I mean, it was just like, I nothing could have prepared me for after he made entrance, and he hadn't been seen for about a good 2 months up to that point, because we kept him out of, out of sight and out of mind until the big reveal that he had been filming, and doing all that sort of stuff. But whenever I walked through that curtain, man, it just felt like you know, bare bone heel versus white meat babyface. Like
Right.
it was just like old school wrestling, the way it needed to be, the way it should be, and it was just like the fans were behind the babyface. The people wanted to see the heel get his ass kicked, and to me, that's what wrestling should be all about. And whenever we swerve, oh God, I hate that word swerve because I can't stand Vince Russo.
Right.
But the way we swerved him there at the end, man, that was to me probably the finest moment in my career. I feel like because of how the reaction, because we built the drama and fans didn't know what to expect. It was like, and once again, there was nobody seated during the entire match, and to me,
Right.
that's a woman. But it was just it was a fun night. Like losing was fun that night.
um, One thing I want to ask you because and I've kind of already smartened you up to it a little bit. There's a big question that's going to come after this, but the one thing I did want to touch on before we got to that was around this time AAPW started bringing in, and the focus was on the homegrown talent, but
Hmm.
they started bringing in kind of the quote unquote big independent name guys.
Right.
You had Colt Cabana. Um, I know Jeremy Wyatt was brought in, who'd been making a name for himself in the Kansas City
Hmm.
area. Adam Pierce came in for an NWA title defense. So we were
Hmm.
seeing an increase in those sort of names kind of coming in as attractions. Who made
Right.
was this your idea? Was this Testa's idea? Was this Hagstrom's idea? Who back but before the TV era, you didn't see the quote unquote big name indies come through
You
AAPW.
didn't.
It just wasn't something like, if we're gonna get somebody, let's get an old WWE guy or a legend. But then that started to change. Whose call was that? Whose idea was that?
It was it was Testa's item. I was familiar with these guys enough to be like, okay, this can and will be a tremendous asset to the quality of our car. So I pretty much approved it. You run it by Hagstrom, he's all for it. So again, it was a collective basically.
Okay. Now it's the big part of this interview. Number of weeks ago, I had Shane Rich as a guest on the show. Uh, Great guy, love talking to him. Appreciate
Hmm.
everything about Shane Rich. Uh, Very, very helpful in just setting this up and very insightful.
Hmm.
When we get to the end of AAPW, I asked him about what he felt about AAPW closing its doors, and Shane was very candid. And Shane directed a lot of the blame towards you wanting another title run. His words, you wanting another title run,
Hmm.
and feeling that you'd already been on top, in his opinion, and according to him, according to Hagstrom's opinion, was that you'd had your time, wasn't working, Chris was losing money, it was time for a change. He thought he was going to be that change, and it didn't happen. That was his perspective. That's how he felt the reason AAPW closed. What is your perspective on the closure of AAPW and Shane Richards' thoughts?
Well, I can't get to the end of AEPW or what he perceives to be the reason for the end of AEPW without first just putting it out there. Um, um, you and I both very well know that whenever you got this whole podcast thing off the ground and You asked me, is there anyone else who would be interested who had a run through W, if they'd be interested in coming on your show? Who was one of the first, if not the main person, I it?
Shane
This
Rich.
is a question to you.
Shane Rich.
Correct. Why? Because I felt like, he is the cornerstone of the company. I felt like with his military exploits, which I tremendously respect, I'll take nothing away from him. He had a story to tell. So I'm thinking, okay, well, get Rich on there. He'll have something to say. And boy, did I I know how Rich can be. I've always known him to be candid and to speak his mind, but I didn't expect that to backfire. um, um, you would be surprised with my rebuttal to what he had to say. Um, and if he listens to this, um, he probably would be surprised too. But I respect his opinion. It's his opinion. Opinions are like assholes, not to sound cliche. They stink and everybody has one, or vice versa, however you want to put it. But you get my point.
Right.
Um, Listening to his podcast, as I tend to anytime you have an interview with any of our talent, going into it, I was pretty excited about what I was about to hear. But the more and more I listened to some of his recall on certain things, even before AAPW, just, whenever he got out of the military, came back home, started working shots with us, I'd always kind of, we did not get along, but I always felt like I said in our one episode, I always felt like there was respect there, but I do feel like there was an undeniable professional animosity. I would even go as far as to say, after listening to what he had to say, some of it might have even been a little bit personal too, because just, the narrative that he put out there, that I was always unwilling and uncooperative and, just, you know, just not willing to do business. Like, if you ask anyone who's worked with me what I'm all about, and this isn't me patting myself on the back, but I am proud of the fact that I have always been able to work with anyone that, any promoter matched me up against or whatever. It just so happens that in other companies, especially when he first moved back home from the military, I guess the promoter looks at us, oh, you got two athletic guys who can do some stuff. They booked us together. I would do the same thing. More often than not, I was booked to go over on him in these matches. I don't think that he was too pleased with having to put me over, but again, the narrative that he put out there was that I was just so into my shit that I would rather have gone over, or maybe even not politic for it, which is far from the actual truth. I never cared about championships. I never cared about winning or losing, because at the end of the day, you're out there to tell a story. Losing is just as important as winning. Losing a championship is an important cog in telling a story as winning a championship. That's what I'm all about. So the narrative that he put out there that I was uncooperative and unwilling to do business, I think it's bullshit. But
Okay.
I never had a problem doing business with him. If I did have a problem with him, it was mainly due to the fact that he, upon getting to know him and working with him, it was, again, it was never anything really personal. It was just always, if you're in the back before the match, and I'm the type, I don't really like to call match in the back. Of
Right.
course, if you want to do a few things, okay, just, give me a heads up, give me a high sign so that I know. But if you're good enough to go out there and tell a story with body language and just, the general foundation of a match, then you shouldn't have to call but a few things, if even that, in the back. I don't think he had the ability to do that. And I'm not knocking him, but I'm more big on psychology. He was more big on high spots. He would like, and I'm sorry if it feels like I'm going on a rant here, but he had his chance and now I have mine.
Right.
Um, I do feel like, if anything was suggested and I tried to work with him, um, if I were to suggest something that I felt would better the story of our match, there was always pushback, and he didn't think it was a good idea, but he thought that, some big convoluted high spot that just wouldn't make sense, would detract from the match, but he would also have an explanation as far as why he think it would be good, but never would be willing to come down enough for us to put it together, appease myself, appease him. Let's just put take away a few things here, add a few things there, put it together. Maybe we'll get a good match out of it. All that just to say that, like, we've probably had 8 or 10 career matches together, and probably only 3 of them were good because if we couldn't vibe well enough to put together a decent match, then how could we go out there and actually have a good match? I just always felt like there was animosity there, and we never really vibed as professionals, and that's why we never really had, decent matches. We didn't start having good matches until later, toward the end of our rivalry, but they weren't all that good. I mean, they were like
The
brawls
2009
that
match
would cover up.
I really thought was a good match. I thought that was got to
Now,
give both of
see,
you credit on that one.
I respectfully disagree. I don't think it was that great of a match. We did some stuff. I think the crowd made the match, because by that time we hadn't touched.
Right.
And I told Sean, because he was trying to fight, he's what's going to be a money match? What's going to put some butts in the seats? And I flat out told him Livewire versus Shane Rich for the championship. And something happened. I believe it was fan choice or whatever it was. I actually got voted. He was the champion, and it happened. And what happened? The biggest crowd we ever drew in West Frankfort, one of our biggest crowds in company history.
Right.
No one can deny that. I'm not patting myself on the back, but you know,
Right.
um, as far as the quality of the match, it wasn't a horrible match, but it wasn't my favorite. Like from what I feel constitutes a good match, I think there was some things lacking, but I do think there was enough in the match to make it passable, and to sort of cover up what I feel were deficits. I feel like our best match was the last match we ever had, um, which was supposedly the bookend for the whole company, which didn't turn out to be that. I felt like that was our best match, and as he told you in his episode, there was a episode where he came out earlier in the show and attacked me, and during an intermission or a interview in the ring, I can't remember what it was, but I wound up taking a chair shot to the skull, busted me open, told the story. There's enough time in the show. If I'm not able to, um, come back out, then they look for a replacement, whatever. Big fiery baby face come back, boom, boom, boom. We're rocking and rolling. To me, I felt like that was our best match we ever had. But you know, I think we were both, despite what he put out there, I felt like we were both in tune that night and wanted to go out there and just tear the house down and tell a good story. And as things and Greg Anthony had a lot to do with the mechanics of that match as well.
Right.
So I feel like with him as an intermediary, that's why things went well. Because if it were just me and him, I felt like there would still be that pushback. Like if that come to be the norm. Um, to go back to one show, it was um, the second Rent One Stadium show we did with it was was it Billy Gunn against Jerry or
Uh,
whoever it was. I know Lawler was in the main event.
right.
Richard just came back. He just championship, and this was about a year prior from where I beat him for the championship.
Right.
Um, we did a build up deal where it was going to be myself versus Rich, who was defending for the championship. We were streaming online. It was, we'd had a lot of coverage. We were opening for the minors that day. Beautiful evening. It was just like everything, like a huge crowd. I mean, it was just everything was there. Um, Sean, something happened where Sean couldn't beat, and I'm telling this story for a reason. Um, going into this match, the original finish was for Shane Rich to go over on a fuck job. Sean couldn't be there for whatever reason. It was something job related.
Was
It
this
took
was
him.
this the Rent One Park show or the final show?
This was the Rent One Park show.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'll get to the final show here after a while, but we were getting ready for our match, that sort of thing, and I got with him, and just to sort of get together a finish, and it had been agreed upon, at least between myself and Sean, that Mr. Rich was going to go over on a fuck job finish in order to continue the storyline for later in the year. Because what happened with what would eventually happen where I would beat him was actually going to happen a lot sooner at that anniversary show. But after that one show, we weren't running a lot. So, you know, as things would turn out. Um, as I'm approaching him to go over the finish or come up with something that would put him over as this slimy snake of a heel, he was adamant that he went over clean, and I'm like, okay, I wasn't aware that you were going to go over clean, but um, I recall Sean wanting a fuck job finish, a dirty finish. And he just like, no, I think I should go over clean. And I'm thinking, okay, dude, you just came back, you fucked me out of the title, you came back, you snaked your way in, you won the championship. You want to keep your momentum going. If you go over clean, you're pretty much going to kill my momentum. And it really wasn't even so much about that as much as the principle of we agreed to a finish already. But he wanted to go over clean. And mind you, Sean had put him in charge of things that night. So after going back and forth over this, for a little bit, he remained steadfast and adamant that he went over clean. And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. If you want to go over clean, if it's gonna satiate your little ego, go over clean. I don't give a shit. We went out there. We had a damn solid match, one of our better ones, and I put him over clean. Looking back, did it really matter? No.
Right.
But, it was just, again, to me, it ain't so much who won or lost or about a championship. It was the principle matter. Like, I hope he felt good after the fact. But if he's talking about somebody who's unprofessional and unwilling to do business, you might want to reevaluate that one, my friend.
So, kind of spinning off of that, and we're going way over time, but we need, this story needs to be told.
Hey, man, I got time. I don't know
Oh
about
yeah.
you,
Oh no,
but
I got time. It's just I'm hoping my listeners are sticking with this one because
yeah.
this the way Shane, in his perspective and his telling of events,
Hmm.
was talking about how on the night you wrestled Mike in the cage,
Yes.
you were supposed to beat Mike, and then we were gonna get full on heel Sean with his protege. Shane Rich was gonna make a impromptu title match after that. Shane was gonna win the belt. That's his narrative, and that was gonna set it off.
Correct.
He, according to him and his feelings, you wanted to win the title, kibosh that idea, and it kind of played out the way it did, and unfortunately, we didn't get to see where it went from there. Um, I don't know any other details, but from his
I'll
telling of
gladly touch
events,
on that for you.
yeah, from
Um,
his telling of events, it seemed like that was there was a conflict there, and then the company just closed. And we've heard a little bit from Sean, a little bit from Shane, a little bit from Kevin. Take me through all of that. Take me through the closure of AAPW.
okay. You remember how I told you how, storylines had kind of taken a darker turn, during season two. You
Right,
remember me saying that, right?
right,
Um, Leading in, it was after Summer Chaos, after the whole Mike Masters thing, him winning. We had started airing these mini, like a four-part series interview with Shane Rich on our episodes, which was building towards eventual return at the anniversary show, our WrestleMania, our Starcade style event. We wanted to save his return for that reason, because it was planting seeds. My idea for that was to reintroduce Shane Rich to the fans. Now, this was produced by Hackstrom, Testa, but it was, we talked about it. I wasn't there when they produced it, but we all had a general idea of what was going to go on. I hadn't talked to Shane Rich. I probably had him for about a good year up to that point because he had gotten in a motorcycle accident, which explained why he wasn't a part of the main event, why he had been out for a while, that sort of thing. So to reintroduce him, we did the four-parter. Um, um, which we had been building Sean as well. It's kind of like this. Yeah, he's kind of sideways. Like, do we trust him? Do we not? To kind of find out that he's sort of he's sort of the puppet master of shit. He had a grander scheme of things. He really never wanted the championship on me in the first place. So his plan was to bring Shane Rich back, fuck me over after a hard fought cage match. Now, mind you, after defeated Shane Rich for the championship, he never gotten his rightful rematch for the championship. So it was his end. You know what I mean?
Right.
So um, the idea in this, like, I wanted it to happen. After the match, hard fought, grueling, bloody. I beat Mike. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Sean comes out. You're not done for the night. Here you have one opponent that you haven't given their entitled rematch to. Here comes Shane Rich. We built him up, tease the fans, here comes this, returning hero. He's anything but. He comes out, put the kibosh on me, beats me for the championship. That's the big, season two, payoff, cliffhanger, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Leading into that, I'm getting there. Leading into that,
Oh yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Chris Hackstrom, I can't remember if he called me, texted me, if we were at a show, but we were sort of going over some stuff, and I wouldn't lie to you about any of this. You could ask those guys, or Chris especially. He came up to me, and he's just like, "Don't you think things have been kind of dark with our storylines? Maybe not word for word, but it was something to that effect." And I'm just like, "What do you mean, Chris?" And he was just like, "Well, with the whole stalking thing, and Mike, don't you want to let things up a little bit for the fans? Let's send them home happy at the end of the season." So I'm thinking, like, I really kind of want to do the fuck job. I
Right.
see where Chris is coming from. I see where that would be beneficial because it's our biggest event of the year. That would be like ending WrestleMania on a sour note. You know what I mean? But my whole thing is I like to keep people talking. I wanted people to have a reason to come back and see us, at our season 3 premiere in a few months because we weren't doing it. I mean, during the season we were airing every week or every other week. I can't remember what it was, but we didn't have the luxury of having weekly TV. But the way our tapings was set up, after we were done with one season, we give them a break, just like any TV. So I wanted to give them a reason to come back to an explanation. Okay, Sean, why did you do this? What were your motives? That way we're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. You know what I mean? So as I'm coming up with something, I'm like, okay, if Hackstrom wants a happy ending at the anniversary show, then I feel like we could do the fuck job in the season 3 opener. You know what I mean? That way we're still doing it rather than doing all this stuff and then we fuck the fans in the end again. Because in a way you're kind of still taking a risk. Running people off. Okay, that sort of thing. But either way, whether we would have did it in the cage that night, which I wanted to do, and I wrote the shit. That was the story I wanted to tell. The way Hackstrom laid it out to me, I'm like, okay, you have kind of a point. I would rather do my original finish, but as long as we could tell that story at the beginning of season 3, we can, go ahead and proceed forward with such a story. That's what Shane Rich failed to understand. And it was still in place. It just didn't happen that night. But that wasn't my idea, and it wasn't about oh, I wanted to prolong my championship reign. It was never about that because I wanted to put him over and give him some heat. That way we got something to go into season 3 with and hopefully veer off from one another because people had seen the shit before,
Right.
but I think his feelings are his feelings, and you can't take that away from him, but I just think he acted when he said what he said, he acted on emotion based on pure misunderstanding. That's
Okay.
what I feel that was. A
Um,
lot of it wasn't clear as far as, you know, that night I didn't have time to explain to him, okay, this is what we're doing. It was very hectic. But I do
right.
remember a moment where that night he was just like, so what am I doing tonight? I'm like, you're just gonna go out, address the crowd, let them know, what you're back, what you're there to do, that you've got your set on the APW Championship Gold. Just that way you're putting out there that you have a goal in mind, and you're also planting a seed, whether or not we do the fuck job that night or at the season opener. You're planting that seed. You know what I mean? And I didn't put it to him like that night, but that I'm just putting it out there for you to, for the sake
Right.
of the story. Um, that's what it was basically boiling down to. And he's just like, "Is that it?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir." And by this time, I don't think he was aware that Hackstrom and I had talked about, what we talked about. Just like, that's kind of shitty. Or he said something real snarky and kind of walked off. And I'm just thinking, what the fuck ever, dude?
Right.
Fuck your feelings. That's kind of where I was, because it was, things were stressful enough, and it was just, you're being pulled in all directions. That's kind of how I felt. I'm like, dude, fuck your feelings. But nothing was ever meant maliciously. I wasn't trying to screw him out of a moment or his opportunity to be a conquering hero or a returning villain. We had plans to go forward with him, just not that night, because Chris Hackstrom, he could even tell you himself, expressly told me that he would prefer us to end season 2 on a high note. And in a way, I felt like that was the way to go. I hate that it was at the expense of me once again winning the championship, because I don't want to be the one, okay, he's the booker, he's getting the belt again, he's going to start putting himself over. That's not what I wanted to put out there. I could give a damn about the championship. I give a damn about the story. I would have given anything to be able to, I was already the longest reigning champion at one time. If he would have did that night, I would have also been the shortest reigning champion. So I kind of wanted that distinction, but things didn't work out the way that had been talked about, and I'm not going to apologize for it, but it is what it is. As far as his opinion on me, and why he felt like them investing money into me and not getting a return, I don't necessarily feel that that was the reason. I feel like there was a lot of things that we were doing as AEPW was evolving, finally evolving into a more modern era with modern talent, with a more modern style, while never forgetting its traditional roots. I feel like there were some things that brought us to the table that had fallen to the wayside, you know.
Right.
Um, we had become, and this wasn't my idea. Most time I had moved to Missouri, and I wasn't able to. When I could, I did, but I wasn't able to, put up flyers and go around and, do the whole grassroots, meet the people, hang up flyers in your local IGA, that sort of stuff that I like to do that I felt brought us to the table in the first place. A
Right.
lot of that was becoming lost because of the reliance on social media. Now, don't get me wrong, it's the best platform and medium to get the word out there now. Every time you turn around, someone's got a phone in their hand. So if you're not promoting and using that as a tool, then shame on you. But that almost became the only way. And I felt like the personal touch wasn't there. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I feel like it would be unfair to just pinpoint one person because I feel like there was many things and instances and reliances upon certain people that was, kind of in what led to the eventual downfall. It wasn't just me. I mean, people are going to do what they want to do regardless. If the fans want to come out to the show, they're going to come to the show. If there's a SIU Salukis game or event going on in that area, people are going to support Saluki or Marion Wildcats or Carbondale Terriers Athletics. They're going to support their local stuff before they do any rinky wrestling show.
Right.
So, that's just my take on it.
Okay. Um, I'm glad you shared that take, and I'm last part of this before we kind of end the chapter on this drama. Do you feel like if you and Shane could have a conversation, this could beef, if you will, or whatever from this incident? Do you think that could be squashed?
I, I don't have no beef with the dude, honestly. I've always tried to get along with him decently. Now, while I will say that we're not fast friends,
Hmm.
um, you know, I I can I hope I'm right in confidently saying that there's a mutual respect.
Gotcha.
As far as your question, I would not be opposed to it. Like I would look him in the eye, shake his hand. I recall times where we're sitting up on car rides, listening to Metallica, bouncing off of each other, useless Metallica trivia. Like, what's this song? What's this beat? That sort of thing. Those are the times I want to reflect on. I don't want there to be any beef. Like, we're supposed to be brothers. And, that may be a stretch, but in brothers in wrestling, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, why the fuck we've beat the hell out of each other and traveled these roads and spent, time together, And in this day and age, life is too fucking short, man. Like, but as far as, getting together and sitting with them, yeah, I would, man to man, let's talk about it.
Right.
If you have any beef or animosity with me or whatever you feel like you need to say, get it out. You know, just just talk about it.
Right.
But I probably won't have much to say because I don't hold no beef or grief or animosity. I never have. Like I said, once again, I'm the one who suggested, you interview him, and I put him over and talk kindly of him, not pat myself on the back once again, but
Right.
anything he had to say was usually with a negative slant. And if that says anything, then, all you got to do is just go back and listen, and he tells the tale himself. So,
Okay. Well, as on a personal level, as a fan of both yours, fan and friend of yours, and with as a fan and with a lot of respect towards Shane, I'd like it if you guys could bury the hatchet or talk at some point. But you know, It's just a
For the
matter.
sake of peace, if be willing to do that, I'm man enough, you
Okay.
know. I mean, why not? So it's out there.
All
Balls in
right.
your court, Mr. Rich, Mr. Serial Thriller, Unbreakable, Unstoppable, whatever you call yourself.
It's relentless now, as I
Yeah,
learned
there you go.
as I learned it
Relentless.
as I learned at Stride and as I learned on R. It's relentless now, which is going to be
There
hard.
you go.
It's hard for me to call him relentless because I'm always going to know him as serial thriller. So
Yeah, right.
well well and I just made a segue. I mentioned Stride.
hmm
Um, right before this damn pandemic hit, there
hmm
was Stride had a reunion show for AAPW, brought back a
hmm
lot of guys, and we got. Well, first of all, let me backtrack. Why were you not part of Pro Wrestling Collision?
In all honesty, I wanted no part of it.
Okay,
Um, I was I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit bitter at the end of AEPW, and we've already gone through a lot of that, no
right.
matter whose perspective you believe. But I do believe there was a bigger force in why AEPW, and it wasn't just one thing. And I
Okay,
felt like Pro Wrestling Collision was the reason for the end of AAPW. So, you know, I saw no reason to associate myself with Pro Wrestling Collision at all.
gotcha. Okay, so now back to the original question.
Yes, sir.
Stride Pro Wrestling, AAPW reunion, the closure that we never got for AAPW as fans, I'm sure as wrestlers too. Um, as well as a benefit for Curly, who had fallen on some hard times with some health problems.
hmm
What did you think of that whole night? What did you think of that show? What did you think about seeing some of the guys? I know maybe now after some interviews surfaced, maybe seeing seeing some people got a little tainted. But what was that night like for you?
Well, if you're talking about who I think you're talking about, I actually got a story when it comes to that, but I'm not going to be all long-winded like I've been.
Oh no,
Let me take a swig real quick.
oh you good?
Sorry, I had to take a swig of water
Oh yeah,
out of my trusty igloo jug here. Um, as far as that night, uh, do you just want what happened that night, or do you want the build up to it? What do you need?
a little bit of everything. How you got announced for the, how they approached you, who approached you. Just take me through for what was essentially to date your last match in the last
Right.
AAPW show.
Um, I was at work one day. I get a Facebook inbox message from Tyler Hatton or Heath Hatton, and he asked me, "So what do you?" Something to the effect of, "What do you think about coming back?" And I've never officially retired, um, but I've not really had any interest in making returns. The situation, the timing, and everything has to be right for me to make that decision. I do feel like I have a lot of unfinished business, but it's not going to be on the basis that it used to be. I mean, I'm getting a little bit older. I've still got a lot of gas left in the tank, but I want it to be right if I were to. But back to the story. Hatton contacted me, and I thought it was sort of random, but I'm just like I, I was kind of apprehensive. Just long story short, I was apprehensive, and he laid down to me the situation and what was going on with Danny Summers, Curly, and I'm like, oh damn, like, oh, I don't want to put his business out there. I mean, everybody knows he had sort of a heart condition or whatever, and it required, a method of fundraising to. I think it was that rare to where it would have been major costly. Um, and he just needed a few hands on deck to try to help him get close to that. So, despite some things that I've been aware of, what Curly said, and has put out there, in the past. With that in mind, it's just like, just slide that bullshit to the side. This is somebody's health and life, at stake here. He's got two kids, you know, I have issues with forgiveness. I'm not a perfect person, but that was one time I really had to, just bite the bullet and just do the right thing. So it took a few worth messages between myself and Hatton, and he was just like, "So are you in?" And I just flat out told him I was in. And when I confirmed that I was in, I was actually at Monday Night Raw in St. Louis, the last Raw that they did up there before this whole pandemic hit, which would have been October of 19. But yeah, um, that's how that came about.
Okay.
And just, I've never going into that year, I never would have thought I'd be having another match toward the end of the year. But I dusted off the old gear. My kick pads were still in good shape, and I just got me a new pair of wrestling shoes, and started, you know, got in the gym and did what I could leading up to, the, hit the. I went over to Stride Wrestling School. Uh, well, maybe I think it was just one time, but um, just to hang out with the guys and bump around a little bit and knock off some rust, and the rest was history. I get to the venue that day, and I recall, just seeing a bunch of old faces and new faces, a lot of Stride's young talent that I recall sitting out in the crowd at AAPW, and I'm just like, oh my God, I remember this kid from Heron. Like, damn, am I that old? like, like shit. I like that event actually took place one day before my birthday in 2019. So, I'm just like, damn, I'm only about to be 37. I'm not that old at the time. 37. I'm 38 now. But it was just one of those things that had me questioning, am I that outdated? But just seeing some old faces, seeing Hagstrom, Huntsberger, Bob Fester, the ring announcer, an all-time classic. If you could get him on here, that would be great. Like
Right.
he actually used to be a wrestler at one time, but he has stories to tell, the fountain of many stories. But just seeing a lot of my road dogs and stuff that I've pounded pavement with, and you know shared the ring with, and so on and so forth, and seeing some of the old fans and stuff that used to come to the show. And my last regular match was the cage match back in October 2012. That was my last match before this night. So 7 years had passed by,
Right.
and a lot of just to see how everybody's changed and have grown, maybe even got a little bit older, and just that whole thing. It was crazy, but also a lot of new faces who had never seen AAPW but only heard of it.
Right.
It was pretty cool, but my favorite dynamic of the night was the whole AAPW versus Stride dynamic that was like AAPW in something, was getting booed. Like, fans love their Stride Pro Wrestling, and I don't know what Tyler Hatton's done with. I don't know what there is in the water, what kind of voodoo spell he's put on these people, but we didn't even have that kind of, you know, loyal support,
Right.
but
He's done some tremendous things with that promotion. He deserves
which
to be
is
commended.
good, which is good, I mean, I hope he keeps it up, but I just, I remember bumping into one Shane Rich, and um, we were in the back, and there was like food in the back. It was like pizza or something, and we were both standing over the. I saw him, and I was gonna make it my point to go speak to him, but we were both standing by this with the pizza, and I was kind of looking down at it like, nah. And then I just tried to curb it, and then I'm just like, "What's up, Rich? Anything to try to keep from eating this pizza before the match?" Like,
Right.
"What's up, Rich? Long time no see." And we talked as if, how you been doing? How's life? He was telling me about a new house he is. And, how's your kids doing? And that sort of thing. I never would have. It didn't feel like any animosity. But I just figured that would be an interesting little note there.
Right. Um,
But yeah, um,
did you see any stride talent that you really? I mean, they're all those all those guys and gals are working hard. Was there any stride talent that really stood out to you?
um, Red Dance. I
Okay.
remember him coming to a lot of our shows when he was a young kid. Um, I'm very impressed with him. Big burly guy that he's got a pretty solid move set, decent charisma. Um, he just I think he has something, and I know he like what I see from him most of all is passion. So if he keeps on that track, and keep pounding the pavement, doing what he's doing, he can go as far as he wants to go.
Right.
Um, what's the young black gentleman's
Savion Ayers.
name? Savion. There you go. Savion. I'm jealous that I've never been able to do a springboard in my career,
Savion's
and I'm watching videos on. He's athletic as hell, even though I wish he'd leave my super kick alone.
uh, yes.
No, but
Savion's
he's
always
a.
impressed me. I've seen him at Anified Underground for the first time, and Savion
Hmm.
really appreciate his work. He's great.
Yeah, Savion. The sky's the limit for him. Um, sometimes I want to reach out to him just to say hi and you know talk to him, get to know him, and see what drives him, and let him know that I may not be nearby with you and get in the ring and bump around with you, but if you ever want to pick a brain and you ever have any questions, I'm here. I just want to just be there, contribute somehow, somewhat, but um, I'm putting that out there for any of you young stride talents who listen to this. Um, but you know, uh, Duke Randall was Zach is his name. I'm sorry, I put the kayfabe. Uh, but Duke Randall, he's been in touch with me actually.
Okay.
Um, good kid. He has an old school flair about him. I like his look. I like that your conventional looking worker. He's still raw. I feel like, there's nothing that stands out to me that would warrant me to, just like, of course, constructive criticism,
Right.
but nothing to chop him down. It's only to make him better. And all I see is that he just needs the experience and the reps. All you need are reps just in order to get better. If I could give any of these young kids advice, and I'm only drawing up on my own personal experience here, is establish your brand, stand by your brand, know that you are your own business, and always conduct business. Do what's best for you. Um, I made the mistake during my career, and this is also part of the advice. Know when to have fun and know when to be a businessman. During my career, I'm guilty of having fun. Like, this was nothing but fun to me. Like, sell your t-shirts, sell your 8x10s, do it, well, whenever this whole pandemic and stuff goes away, if it ever goes away. But,
Right.
if we ever get back into a normal swing of things, do that sort of stuff. Keep that cash flow going, because whenever I was wrestling, I could barely afford to wrestle. Like, I spent a lot of time away from my young family at the time, and I was given I gave way more to wrestling than I got out of it. A lot of that is my fault, because I was young and I was immature, and I didn't consider myself a brand or a business. I was not a good business person. All I wanted to do was just get booked and have fun. I wasn't doing no debauchery. I wasn't banging rats, exterminating rats left and right. I wasn't doing all that, and I am pretty proud of that. But you know, I, part of me felt guilty, even though the money was on the table. At that time, there was a recession, and I could barely afford to even get to these towns. But I always felt guilty for asking people to buy a T-shirt or to buy a 8x10, because, like, I'm part of the struggle.
Right.
These people come to this wrestling show to get away from their daily struggle. They probably took what little bit of money they had to come out and see us and make sure we had a name. I'm like, I've already asked enough of them just to come out to this show. Nowadays I would approach that way differently. But back then, I was just a young man trying to have fun and do something I love without asking much of people. I advise you young people, get your shit together, have your house in order, and don't do what Livewire did. I didn't do nothing wrong. I wasn't out here hurting nobody. I hurt myself more than I probably did anybody else. But just make sure got something to where you keep a little bit of cash flow circulating. Because that's really the bottom line of it all.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you giving your, you know, letting us know your side of the story, giving us your thoughts on everything that happened, and
Hmm.
you know, much like Ernest Hemingway, we get three biographies on Livewire. But really appreciate you always taking the time for this. I hope that all the listeners out there appreciate his side of the story and his recollection of events. And I'm just really I'm happy I got to hear what you had to say about all that, because I still I have the utmost respect in the world for Shane Rich, but kind of
Hmm.
for something that
I
I
mean,
always
so do I. I mean,
well yeah
even in the aftermath of his his feelings and stuff. I mean, I don't change one bit of what I said.
Oh
I'm
no,
not gonna.
I thought he was a great guy, great guest.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit after the thing, the show about military and real life stuff.
Hmm.
Great guy. I just was just really when I took upon this project, everything was always so positive, and it's just like kind of my jaw just dropped, like, oh, we're going into a very not
Yeah.
positive thing right now. Like even with Sean, with the in the end of the end of the company, like we could still leave and kind of think like, oh, that was fun, that was positive
Yeah.
and that was happy, and like, oh, that wasn't so happy. So I'm glad that um, I respect Rich for saying his part. He can. I told him you can say whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, and he felt the need to express that, and I always appreciate that. I appreciate you giving your perspective as well.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. I mean, I wasn't just gonna take it laying down. I mean, I didn't come out of the gate all, you know, full of piss and vinegar like he did, because it wasn't that serious. It's not that serious.
Right,
It's just fucking wrestling. You know what I mean? At
right.
the end of the day. But I mean, at this point, I'm finally grown up. I'm a grown ass man, and I have better shit to do.
Right on. Well, certainly, if there's ever more projects we can work on, I'd love to have you back. If we can ever find a way to get to where everybody could see main event, I'd love to watch that show along with you, or at least watch
Hey,
your
if you want
matches.
to do a watch along, I mean, you're talking to the guy who lived it, and
And Tony,
we got three DVD related events that we can speak of. So if
we
you
have
ever
we have
want to get
those, and we can get.
together,
We got to put them on YouTube so our listeners can listen along with us, because there might be some
yeah,
folks that don't own those DVDs, and they're not
yeah,
they're not on high spots where you can buy them, unfortunately. But
that's rare. You probably have to get actual copies from Hackstrom,
yeah,
because but yeah, just if you ever need anything, you let me know. I wish you well on this project. I wish you an upward trajectory. I thank everybody who listened to me warble on and on and on and on for 3 episodes. I did not mean to hurt your ears for that long. I'm sorry for putting you through that, but the
hey, it needed to be said.
misery ends now.
It needed to be
The
no. It needed to be said. It needed to be said. But if you enjoyed this, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of wrestling, but from the world of comic books, anime, gaming. I'm getting tired too. I need more coffee. And all things geek culture. Follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeek89, Twitter, athletic_geek89, Instagram, athleticgeek89. And if you would like to help improve this channel financially, hit me up on Patreon. That's patreon.com/athleticgeek89. Thanks again to Livewire McGuire. Thanks again for all the hard work, and thanks for telling us your side of the story. And we'll see y'all next time.